Hi, everyone. So, the article I'll be looking at for my screencast is Strategies Teachers Use to Maintain Motivation. This is from the Teaching and Teacher Education 155 edition, released in 2025. So, for this paper, the authors looked at countless literature on this topic to try and identify the most common strategies teachers use to maintain and sustain motivation and resilience. Teachers are constantly dealing with new challenges on top of all the pre existing challenges out there. So the authors argued that it's important to focus on the positives and how to keep them as opposed to waiting until an issue arises, something like burnout, and figuring out ways to combat it then. The authors also looked at the various systems that a teacher will encounter and the resources that are made available through those systems that teachers should be aware of to help with teaching commitment. They then conducted their own study where they looked at an online learning resource called Bright, and they focused on one module specifically from it that had responses from teachers on the most common motivational strategies they use. Those answers were then compiled into 4 categories, with one actually being more popular than all the other ones combined, but we'll get into that later. And all this was done through a social ecological theory perspective approach. Teacher motivations have a lot to do with the environment they are a part of, as not every strategy will work in every situation. And also, teachers' experiences will be different depending on the environment they're in. So, all of that needs to be taken into consideration when looking at and applying various strategies to maintain and sustain motivation. So, the chart on the right shows 15 strategies that the authors found that teachers use to maintain and sustain motivation, with the 2 most common strategies used being work-life balance and problem solving. So the authors pointed out that teachers need to be active agents when using these strategies, meaning they can't pick one and apply it to every situation. They may need to try multiple ones in a situation to see which one works best. And there's also the idea of meta motivation, meaning teachers need to understand a strategy and how to apply it for it to have a positive impact. That kind of sounds like common knowledge, but it's not a bad idea to keep in mind. So, when it comes to resources for supporting teacher commitment, the authors identified 4 levels of systems where they can be found. So, the cultural level resources have to do with national policies, meaning they can be different depending on where teacher is teaching. The institutional level resources come from the organizations teachers are a part of. So, the idea being that these organizations should be helping to implement strategies to sustain motivation for teachers. The interpersonal resources are the ones we find through the relationships that teachers build with their colleagues and with their students and the students' families. And the intrapersonal resources have to do with individual factors. So they found that self efficacy and a sense of purpose were the most common ones found in interpersonal. So before I get into the study that was conducted, I want to touch briefly on the Bright module because I think it is an interesting resource that I was not aware of before reading this article. So it is available to teachers throughout the world, and what they do is they provide questionnaires teachers can take. There's discussion boards where teachers can share personal experiences. There's kits that can be downloaded, and there's also access to a ton of literature on this topic, a lot to do with what do the experts have to say. All right, so for the study, the authors looked at a well-being module that was created in 2015, but they only looked at responses from 2016 to 2019. So out of those responses, 209 teachers were chosen from all over the world. And the prompt they answered was, what are your top 3 ways for maintaining your motivation for teaching, and how will you implement these? So the authors went through all the data and took every single strategy or way to maintain motivation and put them into one of 4 categories. So it was intrapersonal, interpersonal, professional, or personal life. And after all of the strategies were put into one of those categories, the results were that 60% of all strategies were considered intrapersonal. They also found that be positive showed up in 25% of all responses. So this brings us to the limitations of the study and the idea that it's possible that intrapersonal was so high due to the fact that the modules on Bright are an individual tool and people might have gravitated towards giving more individual focused strategies. There was also a small sample size, only 209 teachers used, And one of the bigger limitations is that there's no way to actually verify that the strategies the teachers gave are ones that they actually use. Could be that they have prior knowledge about all these strategies, or they've taken another module and they kind of know which answers that they might be looking for. And finally, here are some discussion questions that I'll also put up on Brightspace.